Hello, Rockstars. It's Lid Shaw, your host for Recording Studio Rockstars. I created this show to introduce you to real-world recording professionals, to hear their stories and learn from their experiences so that you can take your records to the next level and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Mr. Chad Brown, an engineer, producer, gear builder, and Grammy-winning mixer living in East Nashville, Tennessee, but hailing from the birthplace of country music, Bristol, Virginia, or Bristol, Tennessee. Which one is it?
Born in Tennessee, grew up in Virginia.
That is so awesome.
It's an on-the-line city. It's
literally like town. Across the street, right?
Yeah, no, it has a plaque. The left side says Virginia, the right side says Tennessee.
Nice, man.
The bars are in Tennessee because they close at 3 instead of midnight.
These are good things to know.
Bars are all on the right-hand side of the street.
Nice. All right, well, I got a little bit more here to welcome you. Chad started out at the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences in Phoenix, Arizona, before moving to Nashville in 1995, where he worked his way up assisting and engineering through various studios on Music Row. In 1996, so a year later, he was hired at Ocean Way Nashville Studios and learned from some of the best producers, engineers, and artists in the world. Chad has long since moved on to being an independent production and, let me say that again. Chad has long since moved on to an independent production and recording career that has led him to work with many amazing artists like Mike Ferris, who, of course, we're going to be telling you more about that record, the Grammy-winning record, Gretchen Peters, Ryan Adams, the Righteous Brothers, Bob Seger. Was he playing with the Silver Bullet Band at that point?
Early on.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Jim Lauderdale, Patty Griffin, and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members Robert Plant and Bill Medley. That is really cool, dude.
Just cool.
In 2015, Chad received a Grammy Award for mixing Shine for All the People by Mike Ferris. He mixed the record right here at the Toy Box Studio through the famous MCI console, and the classic sound of that record won Grammy for Best Roots Rock Gospel Album of the Year. Oh, excuse me, I said that wrong. I'm trying to read and look around at the camera. This doesn't work so well. The classic sound won the Grammy for Best Roots Gospel Album of the Year, which is really awesome. We'll be talking to Chad for sure more about that, making that record, mixing that record, and how to get that Grammy sound on this podcast. But what's really special about this particular podcast in this interview too is that we are recording it here as a live webinar. So I want to thank the rock stars who are joining us right now from all around the world for your questions and for being here with us on this. It makes it all awesome. And this promises to be a really cool way to do a podcast with real questions from real people. So Chad Brown, thanks so much for joining us here on Recording Studio Rockstars. Are you ready to rock?
I am ready to rock.
Sorry, man. I know you've been waiting to say that. My intros are getting longer. Are you ready to rock? Yeah, man. So, dude, I did my best to introduce you in my own words, which in a lot of ways were probably your words borrowed. But tell us in your real words more about who you are, and tell us about how'd you get into this thing with music?
Early on, I guess right after I don't know, graduating high school, I for a long time thought I was going to go to college and be an attorney, and I graduated high school and decided I had no interest in that at all.
Really? You thought you were going to be an attorney?
I did. Dude, only due to being argumentative. And it was like, you should be a lawyer. You really like to argue with other people, but no. But I was kind of a music store kid, and just bands and guitars and friends with bands. And, you're friends with the 4 tracks and the whole thing. So one thing I thought I could do is I could go do live sound, and I would, I'd make the world a better place because, it would sound better for people when they're on their vacations and their trips, and all it'd be so cool and travel the world. And so, I did all the due diligence of, answering an ad in the back of an EQ magazine is pretty much how it worked out.
To start working, you mean
for the conservatory, I just started looking at, at the time there weren't a whole lot of recording schools.
Yeah. True.
At the time, the recording industry was bigger than the recording education industry.
Right. Times are changing.
you know, and it's like, oh, you seem like a perfect candidate. And it's like, I think a perfect candidate requires you to have a checkbook. But
Yeah, right. That was the application process.
yeah.
Is could you apply a pen to a check?
Yeah. No. So nonetheless, but you know, so I went to recording school. You know, moved out there pretty much directly after high school, and or a year after. I did manage to flunk out of two or drop two semesters of community college before I left, and just, you know, and they had a live sound course, and so I'm like, going to take this, and that's going to be my springboard into it. And it turns out I just really love the recording process, and the ideas of air conditioning and rewind were a whole lot more attractive than, you know, fanny packs and heavy lifting,
especially in Phoenix, Arizona. You know, having air conditioning in the studio is kind of a must.
Yeah, where you go outside and your sweat turns to salt immediately. No, I was there for like 3.5 months, from June to like, I don't know, like June to September, basically.
Awesome. Wow. So that's a real power learning session too.
Yeah, 117 degrees my first day.
Wow. Well, so Chad, we like to start the podcast out with asking our guests for an inspirational quote. Do you have anything you'd like to share with us to get us going? I know you to have the most incredible sayings and expressions. I've pretty much learned all mine from you. So,
you know, mine that I've got is I'll pass this from a friend of mine named Michael Dale, who sort of said this to me, and it's always stuck. But, you know, when, I don't know, from complaining about music to getting excited about it, and, you know, there's ups and there's downs, and there's so much trial and error, there's frustration, there's so many different things. But one of the things that Michael said to me is that you know, it's music's our privilege, it's not our right. We don't deserve it, we get to do it. And so just approaching it like that, and sort of being grateful to have that as a part of your life. And I think that's my inspirational quote to kick off with.
It's definitely a privilege. I mean, you know, how awesome is it? And even when music's hard and making records are hard, to be able to go to work and go make music, you know, or even if it's not work, you know, whatever, it's always even if it's a hobby, it's still, there's work involved, but just to go do it is so cool.
Yeah. And it's a privilege, you know, it's a light that shines and it helps people. It's, you know, comes into our life. And so, you know, just treating it with that respect is a big deal to me.
Yeah. I just had another interview, and the quote, or I think the best advice, I think this was Matthew Weiss, was talking about the advice he got that was, if you want your light to shine, help other people shine their light. You know, it's like, and going to work and treating music and recording as a privilege like that is that kind of mindset. It's that kind of attitude. It's like, I'm here to help all of you make the best music you can.
Yeah. Well, you know, part of the jam of being engineers and producers, and, you know, particularly from a session standpoint or whatever, is you're you know, you're kind of helping making people's dreams come true. I mean, their songs are their dreams, or it's their artistic visions, and you're kind of doing that. And that's it. That is a privilege. That's a very cool thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
You know, ain't exactly saving lives, but it's cool. You know, hopefully it helps.
Well, so let me jump to another question. Can you share with us, if this feels like a bit of a leap so quickly in the interview, but can you share with us a story about like an important failure for you somewhere? You know, you've seen some real success, but give us something which was like a real failure moment in your career.
Oh, so many failures.
Learned, you know, that became a learning lesson.
You know, I mean, my oh gosh, I mean, that's I could spend a lot of time on that. You know, I think I saw was one of your quotes from Reed, who had said that you know, if you hadn't been fired, you hadn't been trying.
Right.
But I think, you know, I started out, I mean, I moved to Nashville when I was 19, and, you know, it's particularly from the commercial studio end and all that, it was a big boy business, you know, and I was not, you know. So I think one of the, you know, I got fired from, well, Yeah, I don't. I got fired from a lot of jobs, man. I mean, I got fired within months, and then I got 3 months. I got fired again, fired again. But it's a maturity thing,
Right.
and that was I think
Just like growing up kind of stuff.
yeah. Well, I worked at my first job. Oh, I had an internship. My first job was at Quad. I got fired after a month. Couldn't have had more things go wrong. It was a hilarious shit show of just, one thing to the next. Couldn't have been worse.
That's funny.
Aligning a tape machine to +10 and getting caught on my last day, getting caught in like a 3 tractor trailer, 2-car pile up. But
Right.
there's through all these, there was, I think the early failures were just maturity. I still struggle with those, I think.
Well,
at 40.
We have chosen a career of making rock and roll for a living.
If
you can't have some fun and be a little bit immature making rock and roll all day, then what's the point?
Currently, and I mean, there's a particular artist I was working with that so excited. And we did weeks of or a couple of weeks of recording, and it's a great band, and there's just so many things going right about it. And this is a funny failure of I did everything I could as well as I possibly could, and that was me at the top of my game, just at that given time, doing the very best I could. And I got I got fired from that gig because they didn't like the way it sounded.
Well,
and that's one of those of going, and I looked at the dude I was working with on day 2, and I was like, I'm going to get fired, by the way. And I still had the gig for 2 more weeks, but it's one of those things of like, it's music, it's subjective, knowing that, even from an engineering standpoint, be it a technical art, it's still an art and it's still subjective. And knowing if you and I actually got fired for one of the quotes was, well, it just has a sound, and I've not really done anything with a sound. It has a sound.
You're like, yeah, I've been
and I don't like it. Yeah, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm trying to build a whole career on it. What are you talking about? That sound is awesome. No, not to them, and to not take that personally, and to know that. And then it also opens up to be able to broaden your horizons and go, well, what else can I be capable of? And also learning to match, to try and better suit an artist when you start to get the hint that you're maybe not suiting them as well as they'd like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've known you for a long time, and you have played me. I remember one record, which you can name or not name, but I remember you played me a record that was just astounding sounding. There's a nice little catchphrase for you. It was incredible. Like, I just heard it, I'm like, well, shit, that's it for me. I don't know how I'm going to get that sound, And then next thing you know, you tell me that they didn't like it and that one's not going to get used. And I was like, are you kidding?
Yeah, no. And I mean, that happens. And that's part of it is, I think it's always good to, I think it's like we got right into failure. Way to go, Lidge.
Don't worry, it gets better from here.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Thank God. Let's go uphill. I think you look at those things and you learn from them. There's an element of it also boils up that spirit of, I won't do. Why did this happen? Because it does have, there's some reason.
Yeah.
So you look at it and you go, okay, well, what can I do? And particularly for me, those failures have often opened up, forced me to broaden my horizons and just open up new artistic avenues, spatial avenues, compression, how you're handling things, and to now it's like, well, it might be time to learn something new. And, and that's part of the process it's just ever developing,
Right. It's that artistic drive to just keep pushing, keep trying to figure out how to make it sound better.
Yeah. And it's kind of like once you get something that's pretty cool, just put that in your bag of tricks and then, I don't know, go learn something completely different, new, and reinvent yourself again, I guess.
And let's see, this failure was before you won a Grammy?
Oh, I've had them before and after. I got plenty
I was
since.
trying to make the point that maybe, you know, it was a learning experience on the way to something good. I mean, obviously, you know, I don't know if it was a direct thing, but you know, you were available for the opportunity that came later that became a Grammy. And so that kind of leads me to my next question was, you know, tell us a story about a success moment for you.
Won a Grammy.
Tell us more about that.
And that was just a that's huh. That's a really cool thing. Is it's Mike Ferris, studio where I do most of my work. He ended up coming in. The record was tracked in a few different places. There was a good bit of it that was tracked at a keyboard player named Kevin McKendry's house. Was there's so a few of the tracks on it were tracked there. Some was tracked at Mike's house, and then Mike and his engineer Ross Gower came into the studio, and we tracked, I don't know, another 6 songs at that studio. So,
So
you
it was
know,
sort of done in batches initially.
it was because it was a Kickstarter record. And so, you know, kind of this came and then this came and this came. And so that's one of the cool parts of the story is it's a Kickstarter record that went from Kickstarter to signed to Grammy winner, which that's, you know, it's dreams do come true.
One step at a time. That is cool, man. That is really cool. And I mean, Mike Ferris is, you know, he's an incredible talent.
And
He's
that
an
he is.
amazing singer. I had actually worked with him at Bonnaroo at the Hay Bale studio years ago.
Right.
That was the first time I met him. He just came in and sang this amazing gospel. And I was just like, wow, you know, this guy's got a voice. But so did you have some participation in kind of any of the production or the engineering, you know, the recording side of it? Obviously you were there for the recording. Did you participate in a way in terms of like, was there a process of choosing and selecting songs? Like, how do you know if you've got the right songs for a Grammy winning record?
Well, there were a lot of songs recorded, and the process kind of filtered them out. Sometimes a song would come in and a song would go, and the process was long on this particular record. So it was, I think the entire process may have been almost 4 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So, you know, Mike and Ross had sorted through a whole lot of things. Some of that gets whittled down. Some of the things tried to be recut. And, you know, there were original tracks that were, I guess, more, you know, less controlled environments that ended up just being too cool to try to get again. And then, you know, different songs kind of came and made their way back in and out over time. But I think part of the process was, is I guess just you know, as the song had life and developed and the closer it got to being finished and the closer it got to being mixed, as the record starts to, you know, when you take 25 songs and then you get, you know, 12 on a record, as the record starts to reveal itself, the songs that should be on the record start to reveal themselves.
Yeah. Let's see, what about the process of recording this stuff? So you did it in batches. Was there an evolution of the way that you recorded these songs, how you track them and that sort of thing? Was there a learning process, like the first batch, the next one you did it a little different, or did you try and stick to the same kind of program?
I was only a part of the last batch.
Okay.
So that I can't really attest to. I know that Mike was very particular. You know, he came in, we had an entire day just to get in sounds and playing around with it. There's, you know, he came in, got drum sounds, listened to multiple snare drums, made notes on what snare drums he might like for what particular song, and sort of went through quite a, you know, a lot of scenarios of just sort of but you know, he scheduled a day for preparation. And I think that that's a, you know, that's sort of, you know, as recording can be, if you do your work on the front end, it sure makes things like mixing a whole lot easier.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think a lot of listeners, a lot of the rock stars are dealing with studios. They might be home studios or they might be professional, but studios that they have access to.
Mm-hmm.
So while it can be hard to get an entire group of people in for a day of sound check, you know, at least there might be an opportunity to get in there and kind of find sounds before you get going. And I agree, taking the time to build the machine, that's what I like to call it. Before you get rolling with the band, you're like building the machine. You know, it's one of my favorite parts about tracking
Well,
sessions.
but I mean, you know, building the machine, let's say without a tracking session is, I mean, when you start with like an acoustic guitar and a click, you know, and then you start adding, and which, you know, I still do plenty of, you know, in a home recording kind of situation, that's where that gets even more intense because a sound isn't being created together. You know, you're cherry picking each sound as it goes. And then, you know, you get reliant on three things. And then every element that gets added is, you know, it's because it's so particular and so controlled. And I think that's one of the ways that I think people can, you know, develop really fast because I think that's one of the upsides of home recording. If you know that something good is out there and you have the ability and the time to try till you get it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
X-Files, Jim. The truth is out there.
The truth is out there. I want to believe. I want to record. So we got a question coming in. This one's from Kevin. And he says, when you were mixing the album you won a Grammy for, did you ever have a moment where you felt that you would be recognized so highly for your work? It's a good question. To think the answer, of course, is yes.
Kind of, yeah. There's a there was a lot of time put into the record, and there's you know, particularly when you take something like a Kickstarter record, you know, in the modern economy of music, sometimes budgets can be an issue, and so I can politely say that our mixing budget was disproportionate to our mixing time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I mean, there's a lot of personal investment. We did a lot of work. I mean, I mixed before we ever came in here and mixed. I mean, I had mixed everything multiple times at home.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of me, because I didn't track everything. And, you know, first, you know, going through with Mike, deciding what overdubs needed to be done to finish the record, putting things in a finished state so we could evaluate where we were.
Yeah.
But just to evaluate that finished state, I had a ton of time and tons of versions of mixing. I mean, and so by the time I got here, I'd mixed them a lot, and I was super intimate with the tracks by the time we got here. So,
and you were at that. So before you came in here and mixed them through the console, you were mixing them in Pro Tools in the box.
Yeah, and in my dining room. Yeah. And so, but yes, I did think I was part of something special. That's why, because that's not billable time. That's education time that I took on my own.
Yeah.
You know, to just really know what I was in for, because I thought it was something special. Did I think, did you know you were going to win a Grammy for it?
I
didn't know, probably, but I hoped.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And when we got nominated, I that was exciting, you know?
Yeah, it was. I remember that. It was very exciting to see the whole thing happen. So what about, was there actually a moment? Was there like a, holy crap, I just won the Grammy moment for you?
Well, you know, it was the day show. So they, you know, it's part of the day show. So they put it on, you know, they broadcast it on the internet. And I asked my daughter, I was like, oh, our category is coming up and we're watching it. And, so we turn it on, and then it's, you know, they announce it and we won. And I'm like, and my daughter's standing beside me and I'm like, holy shit, we won. And I give her a big hug and I'm like, that's crazy, you know? And then I'm like, I can't believe that happened. I'm like, I can't believe that happened. And then she says, can I use the computer now, Daddy? So yeah. I'm gonna step outside and make a couple phone calls.
What's so funny is
call my mom.
Like the kids' reaction to us being excited about it, they're just like, who cares? It's grown-up stuff. But then they're gonna grow up to care a whole lot about something else that their kids will feel the same way about. It's just, you know, it's the never-ending cycle. But it is cool. It's fun to be able to celebrate too with your kids, you know, even if it's for a moment like that.
Yeah.
All right. So let me see. I want to see what my next question is for you. So you kind of talked a little bit about the tracking sessions, but can you dig in a little more? Can you describe what a tracking session looked like for this? Like, what was the, you know, how many musicians were there? Where were people positioned? How do you capture this? It's got a feel to it that's like it's right in the pocket, you know?
So how that would sort of go? It's live drums, bass, electric guitar, piano, or keyboard of some sort, bass, drums, and Mike singing in the control room. And typically what he would do, you know, and it's a gospel thing, there's really long intros, and then they would get cut or whatever, and vamps on the outros. But
and that was intentional. Is the idea you do a long one because you know you're going to get the pocket, and then you just cut out the best part?
well, you know, he'll just riff and riff and riff over stuff for one, but part of it is just getting that vibe going. So like they would just jam on it, you know, and then so there wouldn't necessarily be a hard intro. So you know, and then when the riff starts feeling right, you know, and like with Power of Love is a track that's on the record that does that, and so it's just sort of plodding along, and then you kind of hear him start stomping his feet a couple times to let you know that he's going to come in, and then he just starts singing.
That's wild.
You know, and once it starts feeling right, then he would come in, and then it's, you know, and it does that.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and then it probably vamped longer. We cut a little bit of the end out, or maybe a lot. But,
that's cool. But
8 minutes. You know,
why not capture?
Whatever.
Who cares how much you got to capture as long as you capture the right part, right?
Right.
I remember hearing Daniel Lanois, I think he was writing about that in his book, about the idea of like people need to play it over and over. You almost play it to a point where you forget what you thought you were trying to do in the beginning.
Right.
So this thing can just happen, you know?
Yeah. And then, you know, like with a singer or anything like that, or of, you know, that you're not reading.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, it's not, and I guess it's, I don't know, back brain versus front.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, and also Blessing mentioned that when he was on the show too. He talked about the, you know, the mic capturing this thing that you couldn't have rehearsed for. You know, you can't practice the magic right take. You can practice for it, but when it happens, it just happens, and you just better get it, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, certainly that's a moment of experience of knowing when it is. So
was there were there some challenges for you as the recording engineer to capturing that right take? What are some of the things that conspire to prevent you from getting it?
Well, that's again, you keep asking me about tracking on a record I didn't track.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay,
you know, just as far as that goes.
Okay.
Being now for some of the songs I was there, as that applies to me, it wasn't that was not my role.
Well, but you've tracked many records.
Many records.
You know, generally speaking, I mean, the takeaway I think for viewers, for listeners, is that, you know, how do I avoid some obstacles that are, again, I feel like there are many things that conspire to cause you to make a bad recording.
There are a lot of things that conspire to make you to, you know, again, doing your work up front. I'm a big believer in pre-production, and, you know, whether it's producer, everybody being familiar with the songs. And it's nice if you're recording music to actually know what you're about to record.
Yeah.
Particularly as a producer. I mean, say that you're producing a record on the first day that somebody's walking in and you've never heard them before is almost ridiculous to me.
Yeah.
You know,
it happens that way at times.
And it happens, and particularly in a lot of people's records starting out, you know, basically the engineer ends up producing the record of somebody that came in that day, you know, and that's, even as an engineer, I think it's really great to know what you're in store for, because that way, you know, if something's going wrong. I always sort of things I'm going to track. I try to get work tapes or anything ahead of time, just so I can familiarize myself with the music, so I know what's coming.
Yeah, get a feel for it. I mean,
and then develop a sound in my mind too, to try and dream up a scenario for this project that's successful.
Yeah. One thing I've, you know, on your website, there's a photo of you, I think, out on the floor with Folk Soul Revival, right?
Mm-hmm.
And talk a little bit about that as a producer, and I believe, were you also engineering, or maybe you were co-engineering or something? But the process of, like, why are you out on the floor? Why are you not in a control room?
I had a trusty assistant and engineer covering me in the control room that I trusted implicitly.
Yeah.
And so that gave me the freedom as a producer. I'm being on the floor because I'm not trying to worry about sounds. I'm trying to worry about a take. And, you know, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's even as simple as being there with them, being emphatic, you know, when you want something to happen. You know, there's this great moments, and there's one of my favorite songs, that's photos from a record called Prompting the Dapperness, and there's a song, um I'm spacing the name of the song right now.
Happy birthday.
This Old Flame, that's what it's called. But you know, and it was a duet, and it was really exciting. So when I think we had, I mean, there were like 8 people live, and you know, quite a few people that hadn't heard the song, despite the fact that the band had. So one of the things was get everybody in the same room and just play it.
Yeah.
And let's play it. And then one of the things of, you know, it's female versus male keys. So we have to find out in the moment when it switches to her verse, we need to modulate.
Wow.
You know, so it's like, okay, well, let's work out this modulation. Okay, it goes here. Oh, that's how we're going to get into this. How are we going to get out? And, you know, and everybody's working together. And the whole pre-production of that was or just working that song up was a really magical moment. Actually, it's one of my favorite studio moments.
That's
and
cool.
then you know, you get everybody sort of going. I have recordings of that and video of that I've really kind of wanted to put together as a fun making of. But then you go into the control room and it's like, all right, let's spin it, you know.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I think I see, or that I sort of came to realize this recently too, it occurred to me that you know, you prepare for a session, you get a song rehearsed, you get a sound going with the band, you think you know what it's supposed to be, but the truth is everything changes when it's in the studio. It's like, if you listen, so let's say I was going to say, hey, play this song. Okay, go sit at the piano. You're going to play one version of a song on a piano, but then I say, okay, come on over to this guitar over here and play it on that guitar. You would play something totally different. It'd be a different version of the song, right? And when you're recording, each time, you know, the band sets up in a rehearsal space and rehearses, or you go into the studio and mic up the band, they're different instruments.
Or different people. Yeah, and the whole thing. And, you know, and that's, I mean, with players, I mean, obviously you set them up for what they'll bring will change everything. The one of the things I say to clients is, you know, let's get together and we'll sit, you know, as a pre-production phase, it's like, let's get together, dream about it. You know, let's listen to what we have. Let's do some dreaming about it. And then we'll make ourselves a bunch of rules, and then we'll come in the studio and break them.
Break them all. Yeah, exactly. Because you got to be flexible, right? You got to be ready to just do
because everything we imagine isn't true, because it's live human beings with, you know, whatever day they're having and whatever feelings they're having. And it's the energy of the room. And the energy of the room will usually let you know,
yeah.
You know.
Well, so, hey, we got a couple more questions. Let's see. Here's a one from Alex who says, do you feel like there were any crucial pieces of gear used when tracking or mixing? I guess in this case, it'd be mixing Mike Ferris Shine for All the People that were imperative to the sound of the record. There, you might be sitting next
to one.
Why don't you dig in and talk about that? Tell everybody what that's all about from the ground up, because people may not know anything about it.
Well, that's one of the, I mean, you know, that's one of the reasons we mixed here is it's a big wide open console. Analog consoles sound different. There is a you know, if you're and it's you know, there's a classic tone to the record. And so having a real console and a real plate and analog compressors and those sorts of things, and analog EQ help is just an easier way to get there. You know, it's right? Way easier to use an analog EQ than a picture of an analog EQ if that's what you're going for.
Right. If you're going to paint a picture of the sky, you might as well use the color blue.
Right. But from one of the ways that really matters to people starting out is gain structure is one of your most creative tools. So, you know, driving certainly from a BF-76, driving the input to that as opposed to driving the input to your 1176 over here, they sound drastically different. The analog channel reacts differently, and that's where, you know, you can press up against the analog circuit on the front end, and that's a huge creative tool that has, you know, has gotten much easier in the last few years to handle in a workstation. God bless Sound Toys and and the Decapitator for helping us with that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, but that gain staging and gain structure is just such a creative tool, because, you know, you can hit a stereo bus or the front end of a channel, and it just sounds like it's going to explode. You know, for the same reason a guitar amp sounds like it does when you turn it the hell up,
right.
you know.
You plug a guitar into it, the guitar sounds quite different through the amp than it does just by itself.
Right. And certainly, you know, it changes with every turn of the volume knob.
You do a lot of mixing still in the box, so in Pro Tools.
Right? I do.
Can you talk a little bit about how you manage to make plugins sound as good as you do? You know, how do you mix things in the box? And if you're not dealing with analog gear and gain staging, what's your approach to plugins and finding sounds and getting the right sound?
Constant negotiation.
Nice. With who?
Me, my mouse, the screen, you know. It is challenging, and again, like there's a few things in saturators that have really helped, and that's been a thing. When I'm mixing in the box more, one of the ways that I find myself spending so much more time versus an analog scenario of mix is I spend so much more time on spatialness. I don't know if is that a word? Spatialness?
Sure.
Spatiality.
Spatiality. My spatiality is spatiality.
Space. I work on space so much more because I think that's one of the difficulties. And, you know, like you take this console and you throw a whole mess of plate on it and a little bit of slap back on a vocal, and it's odds are it's going to sound pretty rad.
Yeah.
You know, and it's just so cool sounding. There's so many records that have been made that way. And so your mind's like, well, yeah, that is also awesome. Whereas that's not the way it is in a computer. And so,
but you do have reverbs. You
do have reverbs,
echoes, right?
You do.
You have console emulators. So how do you use them differently to make it work? Constant negotiation,
yeah. You know, and then sometimes I try to use a bunch of them until it starts wrecking my computer, and then I have to take them off and reapproach, and you know, the whole thing. You know, I've got a lot. I mean, I've got favorite reverbs that I like. You know, and then, you know, I'm a big fan of 1176 type compressors. One of the things I think is cool, particularly from a sort of a saturation standpoint, is that helped me a lot in mixing the box was the VBC thing from Slate. All of a sudden, that kind of just brought a little more, and I know it's gain too, but life to my stereo bus that I had certainly argued with over and over and over before I got that plug-in. That was kind of a big help.
Tell us, I mean, a lot of folks will know what the VBC is, but tell us what it is anyway.
It's 3 compressors. It's basically an SSL emulator. It's a Focusrite Red compressor emulator, and it's a Fairchild emulator.
And this is the Slate digital plug-in, so it's stereo. You can put it on your master track.
Right. And I'll almost exclusively use it for the master bus, you know, and it has blend knobs. So I typically use all 3. I'll kind of get the SSL kicking a little bit and then blend it back. Basically have the Focusrite off and just use the drive, and then, you know, just light riding with the Fairchild job. I probably don't do more than, I don't know, I seem to average, you know, getting into 4 dB on stereo compression's a whole lot for me.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask you about that. So it's not, stereo compressing the bus is not quite the same as compressing an individual instrument, right?
No, it's certainly not. And I mean, that's what I really approach master bus compression and I mean, boy, do I love master bus compression,
Yeah.
you know, and it brings things together, you know, it can really help glue something together that was other, you know, make pieces sound like song.
How do you know when you're doing master bus compression wrong? Like, how do you tell if it's wrong?
I don't know. I feel like I'm trying to turn it up too loud. That's when, you know, trying to turn, I mean, the speakers up too loud to get it to pop.
Yeah.
For one,
Oh,
or
hold on, let me say that back to you. So you're saying if you're mixing and you're finding yourself cranking the speakers up to make yourself like the track better,
like
you
to
might
get
be-
the snare drums to hit and stuff like that, I might be killing them with my master bus.
Okay, that's a good tip.
Or you know, if it's a thing of like not getting the vocal to sit, and it's like if you keep turning the vocal up and it doesn't get any louder,
right.
you might want to back off on the master compression.
Yeah.
You know,
Have you ever done that where you're compressing and you think you're getting all excited until you realize you're like, I think I might be over compressing it, and you turn off the compressor and your entire mix just completely changes. It's like the snare is like 50 decibels louder than everything else. You're like, whoops.
Yeah. Yes. So, but I you know, pretty early on, I mean, I mix into the master compressor. I turn it on early
from the get-go.
Yeah.
And why would you do that? What's the reasons, in case somebody doesn't know?
What I'll typically do, I don't know, slow attack, fast, you know, it'll be more of a slow attack, fast release kind of thing, and just lightly tapping it. And then just so I'm sort of EQing with the sound, like because it's going to be there. So that I'm
put it on later, all of a sudden you had something you were close to, and now it just changed completely.
Yeah, I'm like, I mean, particularly with the one that I use, there's quite a bit of EQ in it, you know.
Yeah, Fairchild.
Yeah, it has
things a lot.
Yeah, it sure does. Yeah. So, you know, and which is nice because it's better than putting 10 EQs, putting 10K and up when I can just drop that thing on it, you know. Right. So brighter's better, right?
Good tip. All right, so let's see what else. What about the mastering process of Shine for All the People? Was that something that you were involved in, helping make sure that it was done right?
On that particular record, not so much. Okay. I had you know, there were comments. We had a couple things, you know, basically there was one round, you know, it was kind of done by email. I was
where did it get mastered?
It's got Brad Blackwood in Memphis, and I'm spacing.
That's all right. We'll come back. We can always drop it in the shout outs later.
Yeah, drop it in the shout outs. Sorry, Brad. It's like Entice or something like that. That's really close, but
right, we'll get it.
He did a great job.
The mastering goes out, it comes back, and then it gets shared with you.
Couple tweaks. Yeah. On that though, man, I mean, I'm a really big fan of developing a good relationship with a mastering engineer. Yeah. I mean, because if somebody you have a vision, and if somebody gets what you do, you know, you can imagine if you go into the mastering studio and he's tweaking it 90 different ways from Sunday, then you guys probably aren't on the same page, you know.
Yeah.
At least if you had something that you liked going in.
All right, cool. So we got some more questions in here.
All right.
These guys are helping put them in the window for me. One of them is, but it's not saying who they're from yet, so I apologize for that. What was one of your biggest challenges while analog mixing? What's a big challenge when you're doing analog mixing? It might be that, you know, you mentioned gain staging.
You know, that would be.
It's like it's a secret weapon, but it's also a secret weapon that turns on you, right?
Well, you know, but it's particularly when you're doing hybrid mixing, because for this particular situation, it's not automated faders. Right.
It's like your hybrid means you're in Pro Tools, but you're doing a lot of moves there, but you're also in the analog.
Right. And so one of the bigger challenges, like on my in like this kind of scenario, is, again, it's a compression issue of not riding. You know, if you've got an 1176 and all your rides are pre your 1176, you know, and you're like, oh, turn the vocal up, turn the vocal up, turn the vocal up, and it keeps getting quieter and quieter. And like there comes a point when it's like you look over and you're laying 20 dB into it, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna have to rethink that. You know,
Right, because you can't make a move after the outboard.
right?
You can in some situations.
And
You can
in
use it as
situations
inserts,
where
right?
in situations where, you know, there's whether you're doing manual rides or automated things, but that's sort of when they're, I don't do a lot of manual rides when it's not, I don't do a lot of manual rides, particularly with not an automated console, just
Right.
because of recall scenarios.
Right.
And recall is probably really that's really one of the greater challenges,
Yeah.
you know, because you get something and there's this sweet spot, and every little thing matters,
Yeah.
you know. And so
So trying to recall the mix
if you,
later.
yeah, if you come back three, you know, I had on Mike's record, I have mixes labeled, you know, I think from, you know, I think they might say 12 at the end and 14, you know, like, you know, so
Wow.
it's just, you know, it was
Crosshairs.
yeah, it was a long process. So, you know, they might come back 3 months later and go, man, I want to fix that one thing, you know, and it's like, okay, and pull it up. And
But why go through all that hard work? I mean, what are you going to do? Win a Grammy?
yeah, I don't know.
All right. All right. Here's another one about mixing. When you spend so much time with a track, mixing a track several times, how do you keep from losing perspective? I guess you put 2 years in the middle.
Yeah. Time, man. You know, I don't, when I finish something personally, I don't, odds are it won't be me that goes back to it, you know, and I probably won't listen to it a whole lot until it's done.
Yeah.
You know, but that's me. And you know, meanwhile, an artist is going to have listened to it, you know. I'm going home listening to sports radio or nothing at night, and you know that they're listening in their car on the way home. You know, artists listen, you know. And that's good because that's doing your homework. But and sometimes you just, I think sometimes if you just get down a bad road on Mike's record, there was one song, and I mean, I just got down a bad road really early, and something wasn't working, and you know, ultimately, the last time I mixed it, I mean, it just basically started fresh, you know, because if you're in the middle of a record, you're using this templates and different things. That's okay. This is kind of applying to all these songs, and this works, and you know, all your habits and everything. And I just sort of had to scrap everything and just start like I was plugging, tear it completely apart, take all the rides out, and the months of work I've got in it, you know, that I thought was heading towards something good, and it was not.
Yeah, well, that's an important lesson to remember, you know, is sometimes the best little move to do is to just tear it all down and start over again.
You know, and perspective is so hard. And I mean, it's kind of letting yourself not take it personally. It's not like everything that happened before that is a failure. You just, and I think that's a lot in the studio. Everything that didn't work is not a failure. You succeeded in finding things that did not work.
Yeah.
You know, and that eliminates those things from the process to find the things that do work.
Yeah. Well, those are great tips, man. It's great to hear that perspective on everything. So I would like to give you a moment before we go off into the jam session to ask you about your mix coaching program. But before we do that, let me give a couple of shout outs to some of the folks who have joined us here, because it's really amazing. We've got people here from all over the world coming in from Scotland. We've got people here from Providence, Rhode Island saying hello all over. We got give a shout out to Brian Mejia, if I'm pronouncing your names right, and Madi Fogel. So, hey guys, thank you so much for being here. Wayne Davey, Louis Fernando Hoyle, Robbie Bowling, Travis Michael Tharp, Jose Castillo, Rob Coleman, Quino, Tony Balboa. Any relation to Rocky? I don't know. That'd be pretty cool.
I hope you can see me shaking my head.
Yeah,
when
he's shaking. He's shaking his head. Thank you for being here, Tony. It's great.
Thanks, Rockstars.
Stephen Moniz, Don Parsons, Alan Moffitt, and Alex Skelton and Kevin Freund. So thanks so much, Rockstars, for being here. Really awesome. You guys are the ones making this better. I apologize for some of the technical mishaps in the webinar aspect of it, but glad that you guys can all be watching this on the YouTube link right now. If you didn't know that already, just copy the YouTube link from the chat window and paste it over in a second window, and then you can use the chat window to send in questions and say hello. But Chad has got a really cool thing set up for mixing and for also helping you mix and helping you learn more about mixing through his mix coaching program, which two things to know about it. Well, I'll let you talk about it first, and then I'll explain how people can go find it.
Well, that just seemed like a but this is for what we're doing here, that seemed like a fun thing to do. Get to know some people, get to help some people, and see see how it can help. And so
tell us what it is. What is the mix coaching program that you do?
So I was offering this was basically 3 tiers of being able to, you could send me a mix and get a 1-page review. You could send a mix and get like a 45-minute Skype session.
Nice.
Or if you wanted to send your mix, sort of get the critique on it, have me mix it, and I would give you a video walking you through my process.
You're going to give it to me? You're going to give it
to them? A video walking you through the process and sort of outlining the decisions I made, and also give you, the master mix session so you can see exactly what was done.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I'll reiterate that. Rockstars, for you, Chad is offering, is very generous of you to do it. If you got a mix you're working on, you're working hard on it, you'd really like to know what another professional mixer would do with it, you can send it to Chad. He can do a 1-sheet mix review and send it back to you so you can get a written review of your mix and some suggestions. I assume
there's suggestions. It's not just kicking somebody's ass. Your mix sucks. Thank you. No, I mean, obviously, yeah. This is constructive here.
Yeah. So it's like getting a great one-on-one coaching session, or you can do one-on-one through a 45-minute Skype session, so you can actually have a video chat with Chad.
And then that would be a little easier to have a dialogue there.
Yeah, and then and get it, like, get things explained if you're not sure what he's talking about. So that's very cool. And then the top tier is a complete review of your mix. Chad will mix it. You can do a mix and then give them a video or a walkthrough of what you did with the mix. And do they get the actual mix, the Pro Tools session, if they want to dig? They get
their Pro Tools session, and it's their mix to use however they please.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So the pretty fantastic prices that you offered on those for everybody. So just to let you know, the original, the 1 sheet, which would typically be $100 to have that interaction, Chat's actually offering it for only $27, which is awesome. And then the 45-minute Skype, which would be $200 for the time and the setup to do a full one-on-one review, is he's doing it for $57. That's awesome, man. And then the complete mix, which would typically be a $750 value, Chad's offering for $207. So really cool. Now, if you're interested in checking that stuff out, there is a link right below the video in the webinar page. Webinars might not be working right this second, but if you go to the webinar page, the link is still there. And if you just want to go directly to the link, it's set up at my studio. It's or on my website anyway. It's thetoyboxstudio.com/Grammy. And you just type all that in, it'll take you right there. And there's a page explaining what Chad's doing and his offer at the bottom. You can just click through. So not to pitch it too hard, but just to let you know how you can get to it if you're interested in even just taking a look and checking it out. It's very cool. So Chad, let's take a break for just a sec, pause, and we'll go into the jam session.
Awesome.
This is where we get to sip our water live on the webinar. Hey, thank you everybody for watching this. This is where we would pause for the podcast, but we can clear our throats. So sorry that the video was giving a little bit of trouble in getting you guys able to watch it through the webinar page, but we're getting closer. We're one step closer to having that all sorted out and working. And
Web Ninja
not to
incorrect.
Throw the Webinar Ninja under the bus, but I got to throw Webinar Ninja under the bus. It's just not working the way it was supposed to. But anyway, all good. We're here. If you're having any trouble now, again, you can watch the video live on YouTube, but you can also have the chat window directly in that webinar page. You should be able to have that open in its own browser window, and then you could chat and watch the video. That's basically all the webinar page does anyway. It's just embed the YouTube video and give you the chat at the same time. So thank you for being here. Thank you for all your questions. We're going to go into the jam session now and then also open it up to full Q&A. So if you have questions, please feel free to type them in right now into the chat window. Alex and Kevin can also help copy those and make sure that we're addressing any questions that you guys have.
Alex and Kevin, please.
Those guys rock.
Yeah. But tell us who's asking.
Yeah, tell us who's asking the questions.
Yeah,
do that.
So we can address you directly.
All right, cool. So very awesome. And we can get right back into the jam session. Hey, everybody, it's Lid Shaw, Recording Studio Rockstars, and I am back for the jam session with our guest today is Chad Brown, Grammy-winning mixer, joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. Chad, are you ready to rock? Oh,
I'm ready to rock.
Ready to jam.
Yes, yes, I am ready to jam.
Awesome.
I can both rock and jam.
Awesome. So I'm going to hit you with a series of kind of quickish questions, and who knows, maybe I'll make them take long anyway. But when you started out recording, what was something that was holding you back from getting going and doing what you wanted to do?
Maturity.
All right. Was that involved at in like the decision to kind of really go for it and record?
Yeah, both, but both personally, and it's just maturity and experience. I mean, experience both personally and work-wise of just knowing that, having confidence that you can get something good, knowing that you have to sit and work to try to figure out how to be good. It just doesn't come naturally. Just because you've been around music or know music doesn't mean you can twist knobs in such a way that are magical, like people that have been doing it for 20, 30, 40 years, and you should be like them because it is work.
So should you just go bury your head in the sand and not try?
Absolutely not.
Right.
I mean, know that you can always, even if you can't get something that sounds great, you can most likely get something that sounds really cool.
All right, dig it, man. I think that's true. I've noticed as I've ever gone back and listened to stuff that I might have done early on, and I'm sure you have. Have you ever had that experience where you go listen and it was long before you had the tools you have now, and you're like, wow, that sounded awesome. How did I do that?
Yeah.
An early recording or whatever.
Or sometimes I go, oh my God, that's so dry.
Oh, that sounds terrible. I've already heard that one.
I love it. That's awesome. I just wish I'd used reverb.
Yeah, I did a lot of that. It took me a minute. Of course, I got a beautiful plate reverb now, so why not use it? Now, then I'll look back and be like, why did I put so much reverb?
But at the same time, let's give credit to the 90s when everybody was eating up with Tom Petty Wildflowers. So that's like, oh, you mean...
But that was all room mics, right?
Right. But no verb to speak of.
Right, exactly. So, all right. So, Chad, share with us some of the best advice you received getting started out in recording.
Sort of back to the experience thing. There's this guy, Eric Seraphin, that I worked with pretty early on that told me, he said that, he's like, man, there's no substitute for hours behind the desk, just sitting at the speakers and trying and getting better. And the more you do it, you get better, just hours, logged hours, learning and trying and learning. And I remember years after that, I was in the studio. That's when I worked at Ocean Way, and Ed Cherney was the engineer. And this was a Bob Seger session. See all that name dropping I just did? Oh my God, pick that up. But Ed, who's just amazing. I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm just blown away. I'm sitting in the back of the room and I'm like, that's like, I could work all day and not get, he was just getting rough. And I was like, I could work all day and not get something and not get something that sounds like this, and you've only got 20 minutes in it. And he's like, nah, dude, I got 20 years in it.
Nice.
Like, and so There you go.
Yeah.
Maturity and experience.
That's a good tip, man. I like it. Share with us a favorite recording tip, hack, or secret sauce, something that rock stars could be using today.
One of the things that's really been over this summer, particularly, I have a thing I've been having a lot of fun with where I'll take, just particularly time up, like would take a long, sometimes a plate, but usually like a chamber and get it long, like 6, 8, 10 seconds. Typically don't shave the high end off of it.
Right.
Filter it usually pretty hard, take the, and I'll EQ it to suit. And typically give the pre-delay anywhere between like, I'll actually tap it out, and so get the pre-delay in time.
Mm-hmm.
And so and it'll just whisk off into the sunset, and if it were a tambourine, it's a kind of thing. Nice. Or something like that. It's you can really throw into it, and the high end of like a background vocal or something will just kind of travel off into the ether, and that's kind of one of my new little tricks I'm having a lot of fun with.
Yeah, we were talking, I was talking again with Matthew Weiss about pre-delay on reverb, so a great usable tip there. Good stuff. Now, how about a favorite hardware tool for the studio? Something that when you go into the studio, you love to have it around on a session.
I don't know. I've kind of got three. I just came up with 3 answers on that. One is a KU3A. It's an RCA ribbon microphone that I have access to a lot of times that I really enjoy because it's in this particular microphone. It sounds great. It doesn't sound great, but it always sounds cool.
Right.
And I kind of have a 15-inch marching snare that's from like it's a old Ludwig marching snare that's kind of has the same properties of whether it sounds great or not. It always sounds cool. I've even used it a lot to make I carry digital versions of it around with me if I don't actually have access to it. And my speakers. Oh, just having speakers.
You got some new speakers, right?
I do have new speakers, but I'm using ProAx these days, and that's just having. And for anybody, whatever speakers they are, just having something you can trust. That's probably spot one.
Yeah. What was the speaker chain that we had in here one time where we set them up on top for doing some mixing? You had the ProAx, and then you had some special amps going.
Yeah, they were hot houses. They were monoblock hot houses. And then
that sounded phenomenal.
Yeah. And then
incredible.
Your NS10s, which also sound great, and with the sub. And so it's I had a pretty good setup.
Yeah, like that. Good stuff. All right. So Chad, share with the rock stars a favorite software tool, something that's a great one to have around the studio.
Sound toys.
Sound toys.
Yep. That's one of those things of once I got it, it's just can't live without it. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah. If only sound toys could sing.
Right. I know, but it's I felt like they barely made delays until sound toys came out.
Yeah.
So
that's wild.
big fan.
I know, you know what, let's go into this question too, because I know that you are pretty particular about the reverbs you use when you're using plug-in reverbs.
Mm-hmm.
What are some favorites? What are some favorite reverbs that people might want to check out?
I'm a big fan of the Lexicon stuff.
What is there like is there a number one Lexicon reverb that is the one to start with?
Well, there's a what is it? The Native Bundle. I think that's what it's called.
Is it Lexicon? The PCM series?
Yeah, it's the PCM series. But I typically do a room or a hall. I typically do a long chamber, and I typically use a vintage plate.
Nice.
And that's a basic setup on almost everything. And then with my rooms, and typically I usually have a stereo slap back that I also keep around, a tight slap, sort of like an analog slap, just sort of keep around at all times that things get fed into.
Is the room something that you're sending drums to?
Yes,
example?
a lot of times that's like drums, acoustic guitars. That'll be more like my room. It'll either be a room or a hall sound, depending on depending on the song.
Okay, cool. All right, great. Thank you. What about a resource for the business side of making records? Any recommendation, software, person, do's, don'ts?
People, man, people. It was what I think about that. That's the creating a network of friends, like not necessarily friends, not necessarily like-minded, or like-minded and friends in the whole thing,
Yeah.
People that you can trust and you can run your struggles by, or you can borrow cables or adapters or rent or any of those various sorts of things,
Yeah.
and building a network of people that suit how you like to make music.
Well, now, you and I have known each other for a long time, and we're well aware of our differences and how we do some
We are.
things. Talk a little bit about, as you know, my way of doing things is I'm all about like, can we get a online thing hooked up that automates this, that, or
Automate
the other
this
thing,
and
right?
automate that.
So, but tell us about your process and what's important to you. Because, like, for example, I know you love to be able to have a conversation with somebody about what you're dealing with.
Sure. Wow. Uh, Wait, what was the question?
Well, like you're getting a record started. You're trying
Sure.
to you're communicating on the way in to do a recording session. What are the things that seem important to you about that communication process, which I would call as part of the business a little bit, but
Yeah,
about making it work, making sure you're doing the right thing going
and
into
that
the
would
record.
that would be pre-production from an engineer, from a producer standpoint, and from an engineering standpoint. It's just try to get to know the people and the songs you're going to record. And I always try to dream up a scenario and imagine something that's going to make it special and give the project an identity, and just I'll spend a lot of time in my mind and talking with them and getting to know them to sort of set, as long as that is available, to set it up for success.
Yeah, that's good advice. Well, so Chad, tell us, this is a hypothetical, but if you had to start over, or if you were starting out now, you moved to a strange city, you're getting, like you did coming from Crass here to Nashville, you needed some sort of simple setup to record with. You needed to find people to record, and you needed to make ends meet during the process. What would you do? What would you use? How would you find people, and how would you survive so that you could continue to make records for 20 years?
Well, what I would use is probably not a whole lot different than what I use now, and at least what I have at home when I'm not working in, because that answer, is kind of how I work at home. It's always sort of like but
And so what is that?
so,
What do you
and
have
it's but with your Pro Tools, 6 to 8 good channels. And then you can have a handful, be able to, have 57s for snare drums and guitars, and have a kick drum mic and a couple of mics that'll work, a stereo pair, and then a good vocal mic. And, if you can put together 6 to 8 good channels, there's very little recordings you can't make.
Yeah. What do you use for an interface now?
I use an Omni and a Lynx.
An Omni and a Lynx. Okay. And then, right. And that's your Pro Tools native card or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, I use Pro Tools Native HD.
And then as far as mics go, do you think somebody starting out could not have condenser mics, just have dynamic mics and be fine? Or do you feel like condenser mics are kind of important to get as soon as you can?
To me, they're important. Whether that's to me. I think that I'm sure that somebody could make an entire record using nothing but SM57s and make it sound badass.
Yeah.
The joy of condenser mics is that they do capture a certain space around things. I will say that while building a mic collection, particularly as it applies to condenser mics, and as a vocal mic, build your other areas until you can go to something good.
Yeah.
Because that is you know, there is not, there's, in my opinion, there's not a great, you know, there's not really cheap tube condenser mics that are great. Almost, I don't know if I don't know if that exists.
Really?
You
Now, I
know,
remember, weren't you using the
cheap being a relative term, but you know what I mean.
weren't you
You're not
using
going to get one for $60.
I was trying to ask you about the Peluso mics. Weren't you using those a bunch recently? And
Yeah,
I
I'm a
remember
big
you
fan
talking
of
about
those guys.
what tell some, if somebody doesn't know anything about them, what are the Peluso mics?
That's a company, and that's a company in Southwest Virginia, close to where I was born, and they've been really great. I mean, they do you know, their version and takes on recreations of famous tube mics. They're you know, they're really affordable. They're well made.
Yeah.
I mean, I've yet to hear anything from them that I didn't like, and some things that are just awesome.
Yeah.
You know, they have a 251 copy that's really, really universal. And then I'm just going to call it a P28. Those are their small condensers, small tube condensers that are super versatile. If somebody sort of, if that would be a recommendation I would have of somebody trying to get into a good stereo pair.
Yeah.
And there's many.
Those are not $60 mics.
Those are
save
not.
up your money and
Yeah,
invest in a really good one. And that's cool. And while we're on mics, I might as well give Mic Tech a shout out too.
Yeah.
Here we are on the PM9s.
Yeah.
These are the Mic Tech PM9s, another really cool microphone company. They're right here in Nashville, and they've been great to work with as well. So Chad, final question, man. What's the single most important thing that a listener can do to become a rock star of the recording studio themselves?
Oh my.
What's your parting advice for future rock stars?
Listen all the time. You know, listen to your clients, listen to what other people are doing, listen to music, listen to what you're doing, and fairly evaluate. Listen, do it, and do a bunch of it, and your ears get better. You'll get better.
Nice. I think that's great advice, and that's some advice.
That was a joke. Did you get it?
Yeah. Sorry. So here's one. We do have one other question I want to ask you. From this one comes in from Louis Fernando Hoyle, and he asks, any advice when mixing live multi-track recordings?
Oh man, that's what I did. I'm going through that right now, and it's certainly challenging. One of the things my buddy Ross is so good at that. One of the things that I'll do is I just try and set a sound stage. You know, something, I mean, just try more so than being caught up on whether something individually sounds good, is making sure you're just painting a picture of a show you would like to be at, and you're in a room you would like to be sitting in.
So don't necessarily model it after a studio record.
Yeah, because I mean, you're not, you know, it's just, that's just, odds are your tracks don't sound like a studio record.
Right.
You know, and I mean, it's usually anytime I'm doing live recordings, despite the amount of quality of things I'm using on the front end, there's something, you know, there's definitely I put it all in my trunk and showed up somewhere guerrilla recording factor to it, and, you know, and always something that's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, I think just making sure it sounds fun. You know, you were at, you know, and if you recorded it, you were there. So, you know, trying to represent that would be is what you're going to want to try to do.
Yeah. Well, what about things like, I can think of the benefit of having some room mics and some crowd mics and things like that. I've also seen situations where if you don't have the crowd mics you need, don't be afraid to maybe throw a little extra crowd in there and make it sound right. It worked for Kiss Alive, right?
Yeah, that's right.
I think that was the way that went, right? So, well, very cool. So, Chad, how can our rock stars find you, learn more about you, follow your great works?
Yes, I have a website. It's spacemonkeysounds.com.
Space Monkey Sounds, plural.
That's plural.
All right, cool.
spacemonkeysounds.com.
Awesome. And then
he, and he can see, I've got a fun web series that I do called Dead Man's Cattle Call, where we pay tribute to fallen country singers and artists. And they're always recorded parties that are live things, and you can see sort of approaches we've taken to live recordings.
Awesome. Those are great. Really cool videos too. Love them. So the also Rockstars, just a reminder that I will have links to everything we're talking about in the show notes. You can find the show notes right now on your iPhone. If you just go to the iPhone podcast app and press on the logo where it says Recording Studio Rockstars, it should just zip up and show you the show notes there. There will also be links to the page at thetoyboxstudio.com/Grammy to take you to Chad's mix coaching program page there, so you can check that out, and it'll let you know how to get in touch with Chad for that. And also they'll be at the recordingstudiorockstars.com. There will be the podcast web show notes right there. So very cool, Chad. Thanks so much for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars, man.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure to have you here, and I'll certainly be seeing a lot of you around town.
You see a lot of me all the time.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Awesome.
That's what happens when your daughters are friends.
Cool, man. Rockstars, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for watching. Again, I apologize for any of the technical challenges of making this work the way we expected it to, but as long as this is being accurate, I see that there are 16 people on, and that's great. It's super cool. Thank you for joining us from Scotland, from Providence, Rhode Island, from all over the place. And if you have more questions, you can always just email them into me, Lidge, at recordingstudiorockstars.com. If you had any comments about this that you don't feel like got addressed, and we'd love to address those for you. If you have any more comments, throw them in the chat window here. And otherwise, we may just wrap up and call it a night and go get some dinner. We haven't eaten yet. All right, cool. Well, I think we will move on. And thanks again for watching. Cheers.
Cheers.